On the road to Waverley on a cold and rainy day, I was driving Aunt Kate's car in the normal way. 53 or 54, sometimes 55. I seldom went much faster, and somehow I survived. When I got to Waverley, I got turned around, came back upon the very road, and this is what I found. Them that were upon the left were now upon the right. It's all so damn confusing, and Gorby's got to fight. When I got back from Waverley, I shut the motor off, and I sat a while, then realized that I was terrible lost. A woman I had never known yelled at me, "Where you been?" I just went off to Waverley, but I come right back again. Your supper was upon the stove, but I fed it to the cat, and I'm off to play some bingo, and I just might not come back. Fine, I says, away you go, I don't mind being alone. I wish that you could tell me, though, why ever was I born? 'Cause when I went to Waverley, I got turned around, came back upon the very road, and this is what I found. Them that were upon the left were now upon the right. It's all so damn confusing, and Gorby's got to fight. Late at night, under cover of darkness, the black schooner puts to sea, slipping from the harbour with all sails set and drawing, but not a soul on board. Hi day day, hi day day, hi day 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 day, hi day day, hi day day, hi day 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 day. Almost, 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 almost. Almost, almost, almost. Even though little Pedro was little, he had been chosen to fight the bull on Fiesta. His mother, of course, was quite concerned about this, but his father said, "Don't be silly. He's a big lad." He liked to think that, being his father. Besides, he says, you should feel proud. It's not everyone is chosen to fight the bull on Fiesta. As for little Pedro, he didn't know what to think, except that Tina Katina had the loveliest feet in the whole world. Now, Tina Katina, of course, was little Pedro's little woman, and he would tell her this 2 or 3 times a day. "You have the loveliest feet in the whole world," he'd say to her, and she would blush, of course, and try to conceal her feet beneath her long, lovely skirts. As for little Pedro having been chosen to fight the bull on Fiesta, Tina Katina was heard to say, "Really?" Fiesta. Here, I'll do it again. Try to pay attention there at the back. Thousands of people crowding into the big stadium to watch little Pedro fight the bull. Everyone in a good mood, of course. Laughing, jostling about, telling jokes. Hear about the guy didn't know the difference between incest and arson. Set fire to his sister. Everyone eating mountains of ice cream, hot dogs, French fries, potato chips, chocolate bars, cotton candy, drinking gallons of cold beer or Coca-Cola for those who believe it is the real thing, as they waited for little Pedro to fight the bull on Fiesta. Deep within the bowels of the stadium, in a small and smelly room, little Pedro sat trying to console his mother, who stood by, weeping. His father stood beside her in silence, his hat in his hand, as he stared glumly at the scuff mark on his left shoe. Tina Katina pinned a pumpkin seed over little Pedro's heart and kissed him lightly on the cheek. "You have the loveliest feet in the whole world," he said to her. She blushed, of course, but then it was time. Time for little Pedro to fight the bull on Fiesta. A great roar went up, but then a hush fell upon the crowd as little Pedro walked alone to stand in the center of the ring under the blazing sun that beat down on Fiesta. Last-minute bets were placed. 10 on little Pedro, said one man. "A fool and his money are soon parted," said another. Then there was a loud clank, and everyone turned to look to the far end of the stadium as the big black doors opened slowly. It was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Little Pedro stood face to face with an ugly bureaucrat, dressed in a pinstripe suit, pedantic, sallow-faced, pliable as a thick oak board is pliable, and clutching a fat brown briefcase in his grubby right hand. The crowd was deathly still as the bureaucrat opened that fat brown briefcase and withdrew a handful of papers, which he then began to shuffle endlessly. After what seemed a very long and tedious time, the bureaucrat cleared his throat and said, "All members of this government are honest, hard-working, and responsible." "Boo!" cried little Pedro, and a great roar went up from the crowd. The bureaucrat shuffled his papers nervously, but stood his ground. "All peoples are treated as equals." "Boo!" cried little Pedro, and another roar went up from the crowd. And again the bureaucrat shuffled his papers nervously, but stood his ground. "I'm a big baboon," said the bureaucrat, thinking he might catch little Pedro off guard. But little Pedro was ready for him and didn't say a word. So a third roar went up from the crowd. And again the bureaucrat shuffled his papers nervously, but stood his ground. "This government is committed to nuclear energy because it is safe, clean, and inexpensive. "Bull!" cried little Pedro. But this time, only some of the people roared. The bureaucrat gained confidence, stood his ground, and shuffled his papers endlessly. Many people became restless, of course, and wandered off to the refreshment booth to replenish their supply of ice cream, hot dogs, French fries, potato chips, chocolate bars, cotton candy, cold beer, or Coca-Cola for those who believe it is the real thing. Even though this government is spending piles of money helping to build modern, efficient railroads in other countries, that does not mean we need such things here. "Bull!" cried little Pedro. And perhaps it is because their mouths were so full. Only a few people roared. The bureaucrat gained more confidence, stood his ground, and shuffled his papers endlessly. It is very clear to me that we all want to save the earth for future generations to enjoy. But that does not mean we need do without anything. "Bull!" cried little Pedro. And almost no one roared. "God is on our side," said the bureaucrat as he reached down into his fat brown briefcase and withdrew thousands of free tickets for ice cream, hot dogs, French fries, potato chips, chocolate bars, cotton candy, cold beer, or Coca-Cola for those who believe it is the real thing. And sensing the power of the moment, the bureaucrat turned to look at little Pedro, who stood helplessly in the center of the ring, and he said, "Watch, you watch this." And then he summoned forth a great wind, and the bureaucrat took those thousands of free tickets, and he threw them high into the air, whereupon they showered down upon the crowd as snow falls on a winter's day. And the crowd went berserk. Deep within the bowels of the stadium, in that small and smelly room, little Pedro sat alone at his dressing table, and he looked at himself in the mirror. "So what now?" he says. Little Pedro ate the pumpkin seed Tina Katina had pinned over his heart. I look in the mirror, what do I see? I see a stranger looking at me. So I asked the stranger, what do you see? He said, I see a stranger looking at me. Follow the river, follow the stream, and you come to a place. Don't it feel like a dream? So you sit for a while in the shade of a tree, for 10,000 years, and still you're not free. Simon the tailor gets in his car, and he drives to his work, and he asks you how you are, and you say, make me a coat of 10,000 stones, one for each year that I've been alone. "10,000 years under the gun, 10,000 years been on the run, marching to the beat of a dead man's drum." Simon the tailor gets up from his desk to look out his office window at the people and the traffic passing by, the people fighting to get home, fighting to get away from what they do. So he picks up the phone and he calls his wife. "Hello?" "Hi. It's just me." "Oh? You still at work?" "Yes." "So how's everything?" "Oh, fine." "Kids?" "Oh, they're fine. Watching television." "Right. Well, look, I'll be along. I've had just the worst day." "I'm sorry." 10,000 years under the gun, 10,000 years been on the run, marching to the beat of a dead man's drum. Simon the tailor stands for another moment looking out his office window at the people and the traffic passing by. And then, in the distance, he sees the black schooner plowing through the heavy seas with all sails set and drawing, but not a soul on board. Simon the tailor locks his office and gets into the elevator. He presses the button that should take him to the parking garage. As the elevator begins its descent, there is the customary lurch. Simon the tailor finds a pumpkin seed in his coat pocket. He eats the seed, and he imagines that he's in a field. A tractor is drawing an old wagon toward him. There are workers on either side of the wagon. He can hear them talking about a murder that happened recently, a dreadful thing. By all accounts, rat poison in the soup is suspected. All the workers are shaking their head this way and that, but wanting to hear the details, all the details. And don't you be leaving out the thing, Morley! And in this way, they pass their time in the field. One of the workers bends over and snaps off his stem. Then he snaps off another, and another, and another. How many pumpkins can one worker reasonably be expected to carry? That is the question that comes to his mind as he's loaded onto the wagon along with most of the other pumpkins. Later, close to the barn, he's sorted and thereby learns that, while not perfect, at least he's made the first cut. With some others, he's placed on a second wagon, this one drawn by an old mare, and carted off down a country road. Of necessity, the pumpkins must listen to the driver's pathetic song. Some believe when you get old that it's certain you must die. A cold and heavy blanket 6 feet over where you lie. Not I, my love, for when I'm through I'll just return again. As ugly as the crooked tree that my mother left me in. Should I catch you then, my love, with another by your side, you'll rue the day you looked at him, there'll be nowhere you can hide. For I am yours and you are mine, although it brings you pain. Poison me 1,000 times, I will just return again. Forever and a day, my love, yours forevermore. I'll always be beside you, or knocking at your door. For I am yours and you are mine, although it brings you pain. Poison me 1,000 times, I will just return again. On their journey down the road, the pumpkins have an opportunity to talk amongst themselves. Have you ever seen such a night, says one, the color of the sky? Tomorrow promises to be every bit as good, says another. It is very uplifting to have such weather at this time of the year. We have much to be thankful for. Everyone agrees. From within the pile, there is a remark that is met by stony silence. I've heard talk of the schooner. I didn't see it myself. I'm not trying to say that, but I've heard talk. Simon the tailor does not mention what he saw from his office window. As a pumpkin, he has remarkably little to say. Instead, he's fascinated by his own color, his absolute orangeness, and by the subtleties of his shape. Then he becomes preoccupied with the seemingly endless string of questions. How many seeds he possibly has inside himself. So many seeds, so little time. If 1 in 100, that would be something to think about. But on the other hand, so many pumpkins, there's bound to be troubles. What if a strange virus came along, decimated the entire species? Such things can happen, yes. Perhaps a compromise is in order here, say 1 in 200 or 1 in 230. That might be better. And while I'm at it, leadership among pumpkins is in a sorry state. All this talk about the weather was so much to be done. After bouncing around for some time, a woman buys Simon the tailor for $3 and puts him on her porch. She then goes into her house and gets a knife and comes back out and cuts open his top. The woman then proceeds to clean out his insides, throwing the whole lot into a compost pail, seeds and all. And if that isn't enough, the woman then carves a face in him, a particularly hideous face, complete with pointed teeth and large drooping eyes. It is now almost impossible for anyone who looks at him to see beyond his face, to appreciate the more subtle aspects of his shape, his absolute orangeness. All the more so when she sticks a flaming candle in him and puts him on the fence post. As for leadership among pumpkins, well, that is now a question best left to other pumpkins. Later, the woman gets a broom and begins to beat an old cow that is tethered to a dead tree. A man happens along the road and stops to inquire. "So why are you beating this old cow?" he says. "If you want, I'll tell you," she says. "Many years ago, my husband, a stubborn man, inherited this old cow from his father. His father says, 'Oh, she's a good cow and will supply milk for your evening meals.' So my husband brought her home and tied her to this dead tree. Sure enough, she did supply us with milk for our meals. One night, however, my husband came in. He could taste the milk was sour. So what does he do? Cuts out his own tongue. Was then able to drink the milk. Did I mention my husband was a stubborn man? Years passed. The milk continued to sour each day a little more. One night my husband came in for his meal. He could smell the milk was sour. So what does he do? Cuts off his own nose. Was then able to drink the milk. Did I mention my husband was a stubborn man? Years passed. The milk continued to sour each day a little more. One night my husband came in for his meal. He could see the milk was sour. So what does he do? Was then able to drink the milk. Did I mention my husband without eyes, without a nose, without a tongue, was so ugly. I couldn't bear to look at him. So I buried him out behind the barn. Now, I'm very lonely. That's why I beat this old cow. Just last night, I walked to the edge of the cornfield and I saw the black schooner pass. Have you seen it yet? No. I haven't, but, I don't really believe such things. Would you care for a bowl of soup? Yes, I'd like that. So they go into the house. Grandmama sits on the mantel. She's been there these 50 years. Speaks to me when nights are darkest. Tells me that I need not fear. But I say I have misgivings. Silly boy, she smiles at me. Grandmama sits on the mantel. Just now, oh so quietly. When they've finished the soup, the woman says, "So, tell me a story." "All right," says the man. Let me think. Two young lovers are walking down a country lane on a pleasant afternoon, not winter, and they come upon a fortune teller who's coming the other way. And the fortune teller takes one look at the young man and says, "You don't have long to live." So the young man, he runs off in fear, of course, and he locks himself in a dismal little room without windows. And the woman, she follows behind him, and she bangs on the door and begs him to come out. "So that we might enjoy what time we have left," she says. No. If I deny myself all life's pleasures, then death, when it comes, will have no sting. So, after a while, the woman goes away. So, well, when the young man turns 103, he realizes that perhaps the fortune teller made a mistake. So he comes out of this dismal little room without windows where he'd spent so many years, and he goes in search of her, thinking that he's going to give her a piece of his mind, right? But he finds that she died many years before. So? Well, then he goes in search of the young woman with whom he had spent so many pleasant afternoons down by the river, but he finds that she died, too, many years before. Although he does meet some of her children, and some of her children's children, and some of their children, so naturally he feels rather depressed about this, and he decides the only thing he can do is return to this dismal little room where he'd spent so many years. But on his way, he's struck on the head by a falling tree. And his final thought on the matter is that perhaps the fortune teller had been right, after all. Later, when the woman has fallen asleep, the man believes that he can hear whispering coming from the darkness across the room. So he gets out of bed and he goes to the woman's dresser. There's a jar on the dresser. He picks up the jar and he moves to stand in the window so that he might see more clearly with the help of the moon, which is full. In the jar, there is a man's nose, 2 eyes and a tongue. The eyes are rolling about crazily, quite independent one from the other, and the tongue wags. The man realizes that it must have been the tongue that he heard, so he holds the jar closer to his ear, and the tongue says, "It's time for me to sing my song." There was a man, his name was Bill. He lived over by Fanny's Hill. One day he fancied he'd go to sea. That was the end of Bill. There was a man, his name was John. Once was here, but now he's gone. One day he fancied he'd go to sea. That was the end of John. There was a man, his name was Fred. Once got caught behind the shed. Then he fancied he'd go to sea. That was the end of Fred. This song goes on for some time, as you can well imagine, with the man standing in the moonlight holding the jar to his ear. I won't burden you with the next 137 verses, although you might find the last verse interesting. So now we finally come to me, as pretty a sight as you'll ever see. One day I said, I won't go to sea. That was the end of me. When the song is over, the tongue stops wagging and the eyes stop rolling about crazily, so the man puts the jar back on the dresser and returns to bed, feeling slightly uneasy. The woman stirs and reaches for him. Then she opens her mouth as though to yawn, and it is then that the man notices the black schooner inside the woman's head. It stands out on a bay as though waiting for wind. its sails hanging limply. The woman's labored breathing sends high swells across the bay, causing the boat to roll heavily and the sails to slat. The man tries to rouse the woman, first by squeezing her breasts and then by shaking her roughly, but it is no use. She won't wake up. So then he tries to close her mouth so that he won't have to look at the schooner. He puts one hand on the top of her head and the other under her chin, and he pulls together with all his might, but without any result that can be measured. Several sleepless hours pass with the man turning fitfully this way and that. It matters not which way he faces, the sight of the schooner inside the woman's head confronts him, indeed, beckons to him. Finally, with much difficulty, the man climbs inside the woman's mouth and begins to swim for the schooner. Hi di di, hi di di, hi di 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 di, hi di di, hi di di, hi di 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 di. Almost, 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 almost. Almost, 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 all. After too long in the water, the man gives up. The city says they've had it. Whose idea was this anyway? So then begins the long return and the search for the woman's mouth, thinking that if he can just get back to the room, he might then ask the advice of the tongue, which he assumes must still be in the jar on the woman's dresser, along with the eyes and the nose. But, predictably, he can't find the woman's mouth again. And predictably, he comes to believe that he's about to drown. He turns for one last look at the schooner. A wind has come up. Her sails are filling. She begins to move slowly through the dark sea. The man thinks of calling out, but realizes, of course, there's no one on board. So instead, he closes his eyes, and he sees a pig farmer out behind his barn feeding pigs. Pig farmer! Pig farmer! Yes, says the pig farmer, turning but not seeing. Now the man had intended to ask for help, but instead he poses the following question. Why are you wasting your time feeding pigs? Go to your room and develop your mind. The pig farmer runs to tell his wife. Wife, I was out behind the barn feeding the pigs and I heard a voice telling me I'm wasting my time. What I should really do is develop my mind. Your what? Said the wife. My mind, said the pig farmer, my mind. And the wife could barely contain herself, so the pig farmer ran to see the parson. Parson, may I have a word with you? If you must, said the parson. I was out behind the barn feeding the pigs and I heard a voice telling me I'm wasting my time. What I should really do is develop my mind. Your what? Said the parson. My mind, said the pig farmer, my mind. And the parson could barely contain himself. So the pig farmer ran to see his best friend, the butcher. Butcher, butcher, I have something to tell you. I was out behind my barn feeding the pigs, and I heard a voice telling me I'm wasting my time. What I should really do is develop my mind. Your what? Said the butcher. My mind, said the pig farmer, my mind. Well, who's going to feed the pigs? Said the butcher. Well, I don't know, said the pig farmer. Perhaps you could feed the pigs. Me, said the butcher. I'm not a pig farmer. I am a butcher. Well, I don't know, said the pig farmer, but I must develop my mind. On his way home, the pig farmer ran into the parson on the road. Pig farmer, I would have a word with you. If you go and develop your mind, who will feed the pigs? Well, I don't know, said the pig farmer. Perhaps you could feed the pigs. Me, said the parson. I'm not a pig farmer. I am a parson. Well, I don't know, said the pig farmer, but I must develop my mind. When the pig farmer got home, he found his wife sitting in the kitchen window, staring out to the barnyard. Where have you been? She says the pigs are already grown weak and thin. Get out there and feed them. Perhaps you could feed the pigs, said the pig farmer. Me, said the wife. I'm not a pig farmer. I am a wife. But it was too late. The pig farmer had already disappeared upstairs to his room, locking the door behind him. The wife continued to sit in the window as the thing that is or is not visited the barnyard to take the first pig. Then the second. Then the third. There was a knock on the door. The wife was frightened, thinking it might be the thing that is or is not come to take her away, but it was only the parson. Where is your husband? In his room. I would have a word with him. I am already grown weak and thin. "'Tis no use. I too am grown weak and thin. Although I would not shun some comforting." The parson did what little he could, which was little indeed, and left. Returning along the road, however, he was confronted by the thing that is or is not. "Hello, parson." "Not today. I got no time." In the end, the parson went kicking and thrashing about as a spoiled child. The wife continued to sit in the window as the thing that is or is not made more visits to the barnyard. There was another knock on the door. Again the wife was frightened, but this time it was only the butcher. "Where is your husband?" "In his room." "I would have a word with him. All the people in the village are grown weak and thin." "'Tis no use. I too am grown weak and thin. Although I would not shun some comforting." The butcher did what he could and left. Returning along the road, however, he too was confronted by the thing that is or is not. "Hello, butcher." "Not today. I got no time." In the end, the butcher went like a lamb. The wife continued to sit in the window staring out to the now empty barnyard. There was a final knock on the door. "Hello, wife?" I got no time. Although I would not shun some... In the end, the wife was comforted. The pig farmer sat cross-legged on the floor, staring at a blank wall. His mind wandered aimlessly, lighting first on one thing, then on another. Finally, he began to count the hairs on the end of his nose. Then he counted all the noses on each and every hair. Then it became necessary to count all the hairs on all the noses, on each and every hair on the end of his nose, and in this way he passed his time. Hunger eventually got the better of him, and he searched out the cracks in the floor for something to eat. The only thing he could find was a dried-up old pumpkin seed, which he quickly put in his mouth. And no sooner had he done this than the pig farmer saw a tremendous light. And this tremendous light drew the pig farmer out of his own body, so that he was able to look down at himself, sitting cross-legged on the floor. And in this way he saw that he was a hare, sitting cross-legged on the end of somebody's nose. The pig farmer came out of his room to tell his wife, "Wife, wife, I have developed my mind." But there was no one there. So then he ran to see the parson. "Parson, parson, I have developed my mind." But there was no one there. So then he ran to see his best friend, the butcher. "Butcher! Butcher!" The pig farmer returned home, thinking the pigs might be interested. "Pigs! Pigs!" The thing that is or is not confronted the pig farmer in the barnyard. "Hello, pig farmer." "Not today. I got no time. Don't you realize I've just developed my..." The black schooner comes about smartly and bears off on a new tack, her sails full and drawing, but not a soul on board. Somewhere a tongue sings. There was a man, his name was Bill. He lived over by Fanny's Hill. One day he fancied he'd go to sea, and that was the end of Bill. There was a man, his name was John. Once was here, but now he's gone. You see, he fancied he'd go to sea, and that was the end of John. There was a man, his name was Fred, once got caught behind the shed. And then he fancied he'd go to sea, and that was the end of Fred. So now we finally come to me, as pretty a sight as you'll ever see. One day I said, I won't go to sea.